Hello and welcome to today's webinar. Today we're talking about horses that we think might be too old to learn. And I know a lot of you have older horses that have perhaps had rather checkered histories, and you do sometimes wonder, whether they're a bit beyond it, whether it's unfair perhaps to ask them to start something completely different and at a later stage of their lives. We spend a lot of time discussing what age we should start horses at. So that's the sort of other end of the spectrum. And we now know a lot more than we used to know about that and about how horses develop physiologically. And we now know that really we shouldn't be riding horses until they're about 5 years of age. So it's very different from what we used to think not that long ago. And of course, there are still a lot of horses that are ridden quite hard under saddle at the age of 2. The Futurity and of course the thoroughbred racehorses are ridden very young as well. So, but we do know that the growth plates haven't closed and that really the horses aren't mature enough to be ridden at that age. And things are slowly changing, which is really nice to see. And that, of course, doesn't mean that you can't do a lot of preparation work with these young horses. It's just that they shouldn't be spending, a lot of time being ridden. So what you can do all of the other foundation training, which of course means that by the time you get on and ride the horse, that the horse is physically and mentally prepared for that. And so I tend to do the give to the bit, the shoulder control, I long rein the horses, all of these things, from the age that they have seen a dentist and can wear a bridle. I teach all of this so that when I do go to get on, the horse understands about traveling in frame. And having done that on the long reins, the horse has built up those top line muscles that it needs to carry me. So at the other end of the spectrum is the older horse. And, really we come across a lot of older horses that perhaps some of them might have been race horses, they've been in the racing industry for a while. Others might have been, children's horses, and they've been to pony club and had a rather sort of checkered history. So what age is it too old for the horse to learn? And I think as long as your horse is comfortable, then it's really never too old to learn. And, it's very true that horses really appreciate that engagement, I think, at whatever age they are. Of course, you have to be sensible about what you're going to teach them. If your horse is 22, for example, it's probably unfair to decide then that it'd be a great riding horse. But you still, you can engage your horse with learning, and there's lots of things you can do with the horse on the ground using the can-do training to really improve its quality of life through giving it, some fun things to do. I would start just with simple pressure release exercises. So you could teach your older horse, just to put its head down, or you could teach the older horse to lead nicely next to you. There's all sorts of liberty work you could do with that horse that would engage it and give it a bit of a job to do and just make its life a little bit more interesting than just standing around in the paddock. We often come across the horse, let's say a horse, and they come to me quite a lot. I had one the other day that was, I think, 16 or 17 and had been in pony club for a lot of years. And it was used to traveling around with its head very high and its back very hollow. And the young rider really wanted to actually start doing some dressage and wanted to improve the horse's performance. And also the other thing about the horse was it was shying a lot. And so it was a bit dangerous to ride. And so, the big question was, is it too old? It's 17 now and it's been doing this, been going around since it was 3 years old like this. Is it too old to learn? And the short answer is absolutely not. And not only is it not too old to learn, but most horses really appreciate that, the change and the engagement. And so what we did, we started, of course, with give to the bit, simple pressure release exercise. And what that does is it engages the horse and it starts to build that bubble of communication. So once we started talking and we started communicating, the horse started to look for answers in movement. Whereas before, the horse was, because it wasn't engaged with its young rider, it was pretty much on its own. And that was what has led to the shying, because the horse wasn't sort of in that bubble of communication, wasn't under the stimulus control of the rider. It felt rather alone out there, and so it began to shy at things and lost its confidence. So just by engaging it, by giving it a simple pressure release exercise of give to the bit, we started to build that bubble. And the next thing we did was we started to improve performance, because by teaching the horse to give to the bit, it lowers the horse's head and it allows the horse to lift its back and start to use its top line muscles. And so that was really interesting, because the horse actually started to relax. And before, the horse wasn't relaxed. And when the horse's head is up and it's very vigilant and its back is hollow, it's not a relaxed posture at all. It's quite the opposite. And so just by taking that responsibility away from the horse and allowing the horse to be soft and responsive and communicate, we enable the horse also to relax. And, you know, you can't force a horse to relax. You can offer it an opportunity to relax, but you can't force it to relax. And so the way you offer it the opportunity is to actually start communicating with it. You have to engage the horse in some way so that you can then offer it the opportunity to relax. And so what was happening with this horse, this older horse, he was getting way too emotional. And so the young rider wasn't able to get him to relax. And the more things going on outside and the more that was happening at Pony Club, the more emotional the horse was getting. And this was sort of spiraling out of control, which isn't an unusual thing to happen with these types of horses, because they're feeling quite alone and because their rider isn't sort of communicating with them at all. So the simple give to the bit exercise enabled the rider and the horse to start communicating and began to build that bubble. And once that had begun, the horse then started to look for answers in movement. And so its emotional level started to come down, because its focus changed from everything around it, which is quite overwhelming, especially in a very busy situation or a new situation. Its focus changed from all of that just to the rider. I feel the pressure here. I'm going to move something and I'm going to see if I can get a release and a reward. So that's one example. The other one that we come across that I find a horse that really appreciates learning is an older schoolmaster or an off-the-track horse. And they really love the give to the bit exercise in particular, because the dressage schoolmaster, for example, or an old riding school horse, or a horse that's had children riding it, or an off-the-track horse, all of those horses have been subjected to a lot of unrelenting pressure. And that just means pressure that doesn't go away for any reason. So it's like having, if you think about the race horses, for example, they race with a lot of pressure on the bridle and the bit. And it doesn't matter whether the jockey is trying to stop them or make them go or get them into the barrier or turn them. The pressure doesn't go away. They just live with that. Even when they're being led around in the saddling paddock, they're usually being jerked in the mouth. You know, it's meaningless, unrelenting pressure. So when we get them as pleasure riders, we soon realize that they don't understand anything about pressure release, because they've never been taught that. They've been muscled through everything. And especially, you know, as women or as ethical riders, we don't want to muscle our horses through things. We want to educate our horses. And so what we need to do then is to engage them with learning. And I start that with the give to the bit exercise again. Then the give to the bit exercise is a simple pressure release exercise. But what it does is it enables the horse to relax and engage with you. So once you teach the horse that the horse is going to feel a pressure, the horse needs to move something, and the pressure gets released, the horse starts to think, oh, okay, this is pretty cool. I can do this. So I feel a new pressure. I'm going to try moving a few things, and when I move the correct thing, the release comes. And so horses learn really fast with this, and they develop a bit of a shopping list of things that they can move and ways of getting a release. And starting with the give to the bit is such a simple exercise. And I find, especially with the off the track thoroughbreds, that quite often to begin the exercise, you'll need more pressure than the horse has been habituated to. So what happens with a schoolmaster or a thoroughbred racehorse is they're subjected to all that unrelenting pressure. And because it's meaningless, because it never goes away, they habituate to it or they desensitize to it. And so when we go in and then say, right, now I want to teach you give to the bit and softness in the bridle, the horse, and you put some pressure on the horse goes, oh, I don't care about that. Yeah, I've been taught to ignore that amount of pressure, and you won't get a response. So what we have to do initially is make sure we use enough pressure to get the horse to respond. So the pressure is our motivator. And while we might have to start with quite a lot of pressure with these horses that have been desensitized to pressure, it's also important to realize that every time we apply that cue, we want to use less pressure. The aim is always for self-carriage. The aim is always to use less and less and less pressure. And so we need to think about that, but we also need to get a response. So your motivator is the pressure, and the horse dictates how much is necessary. And so a lot of people think, oh, well, I'm a really nice, kind rider, and I've got very soft, gentle hands, and so I don't want to pick up too much pressure. And that's fine, but you're not actually working towards reducing the amount of pressure required to get a response. So initially, we need to pick up enough pressure to get the horse to respond so that we can release it, so that we can release it 100%. Not so we can release it a little bit, no, so we can release all of it. So when I'm teaching a horse to travel in frame, for example, I'll pick up pressure on one rein, enough to get the horse to respond with movement, and I'll release all of that. What I'm looking for is self-carriage. So that means the horse stays in the frame, travels in the frame, without me having to hold it in frame. And, that's the difference between true self-carriage and holding a good contact. Because the problem with a good contact is that what I might feel is a good contact might be, 1 Newton of pressure, and what somebody else might feel might be 10. And what a dressage rider might feel might be 20. There is no definition of a good contact. But what we do know is that any contact that's held that isn't released, whether it's your hands and bit pressure or whether it's your legs and leg pressure, any contact that's held and isn't released will be desensitized to. So if you wrap your legs around your horse when you're riding and you don't release that pressure, in order to get a response, you've got to add pressure to that. If you take your legs off your horse and only apply leg when you're looking for a change in behavior, then you've got a horse that's in self-carriage. Then your horse maintains the speed, the tempo, the line, everything without you having to hold it there with your legs. And the same applies for your bit. So if your horse will travel in frame and carry itself and maintain line and speed and tempo and rhythm without you constantly jiggling the bit or holding it in frame, then you've got a horse that's in self-carriage. But if you are holding it there, if you are holding a good contact, then if you want to change, you're going to have to increase that pressure. And as we know, horses desensitize to these pressure cues quite readily, then the pressure required is going to keep increasing. And that's what happens when we get the off-the-track horses or the dressage schoolmasters, is they have been subjected to all this unrelenting pressure. So we need to take them back and we need to teach them about release, because that's what they maybe never learned, or maybe they did learn, but maybe they've forgotten. So we need to teach them about release and about self-carriage, which is so important. The other horses that desensitize to pressure are horses that have had a sort of unpredictable training. So that might be horses ridden by children. So going back to the example that we started with, the Pony Club horse that came to me recently, that was a horse that had been ridden by children all of its life. And, you know, we all love kids, but they're unpredictable and they don't have a good release often, children. And horses hate things that are unpredictable. Horses love patterns. That's why we teach in patterns, because they love patterns and they're great learners of patterns. And so when the horse has been ridden by children a lot that don't release well, so when the horse has the correct response, their release timing is often poor or non-existent, and they're not predictable. So quite often surprise the horse with a pressure or a kick or something. So they're not setting up really good patterns either. So the horse then learns to desensitize to pretty much everything. You have two sort of choices there. Either the horse desensitizes to things and shuts down, which is quite a common response, or the horse gets really reactive and quite anxious. And that was more the response that this horse that I saw had. I think that horse had probably shut down for some time. It changed homes, it changed owners, and it went to the new owner as a very quiet, bomb-proof type horse. And I think it was quite shut down. And then the new owner actually wanted to improve the horse's performance, so started trying to engage it. And that's when things went wrong. That's when the horse actually woke up and thought, oh, I see, I'm being involved in the learning process. This is quite fun. And it was no longer shut down. And so they then needed to actually take control of its training, which they did, which was great, really great to see. She actually took the horse back to Pony Club after it had seen me, and everyone thought she had a new horse because the horse was a completely different animal. The next time she took it back, it had stopped shying and it was traveling around with its head down. It was all relaxed and nice. So that was really lovely. So with your older horse, that is exactly what I would do. I would start with the give to the bit lesson, assuming your horse is, you know, fit and healthy and able to ride. I would start with the give to the bit lesson, because it's dependent on your horse's training history. But basically, horses that have been desensitized to pressure or been subjected to unrelenting pressure simply don't know that there's a release there. And so I find those horses, you can almost see them going, oh, thank you. You really can. When you're working with them, they're wonderful to work with, because when you explain to them that there is a complete release of pressure and there's a right answer for everything, then the horse, you know, they engage really fast and they really soak up the training. They absolutely love it. They absolutely soak it up. And it's so fun as a trainer to work with those sorts of horses. So I really encourage you to make a start, and just start with something simple like give to the bit, because give to the bit is the fastest way I've found of actually getting the horse into that bubble, into that engagement zone, and therefore getting the horse to relax. And it's just pointless trying to train anything unless you start with relaxation. And we can't force the horse to relax. We've got to do something proactive. If you have a horse that's shying like this Pony Club horse was, that is really reactive. The horse is reacting, and it makes us very reactive as well, because we're just waiting for the horse to do something and then we're reacting to that. What you want to do is step in and be proactive about your training and start taking control by engaging the horse with learning and therefore allowing the horse to relax. Anyway, I will see you next week. I'm going to stay around and do some Q&A. So if you're listening, please do hang around. If you have a question, I would love to have a chat with you. And I'll see you next week.